Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. Thank you very much for joining me once again. You are always most welcome. Well, today, something quite special. I've got to be honest, I've been looking forward to this one for a long time. Recently, some of you back in the spring, you'll have seen that I did the review of the 1/12 scale Meng McLaren Honda MP44, which driven by Ayrton Senna and Alan Prost, and I did several talks about that as well. Quite a few of you that follow the channel will know that I've already built a couple of these Tamiya 12 scale racing cars Formula 1, particularly the, I've actually built three, but the only two I've got left, I don't know what I did. One was built many moons ago when I was a wee lad, you know. So I didn't keep that one. I think I broke it up, I shot it with an air apple, something silly. But anyway, I did keep the better, more recent ones, which was the Ferrari 640, the 1990 Nigel Mansell number 2 Ferrari, with its V12 Tipo V12 engine, and also Ayrton Senna's MP46 McLaren from 1991, which is a beautiful Tamiya kit. And this now, today, we have Ayrton Senna's Lotus 99T, T for turbo, from the 1987 Formula 1 season. Now, this car is special for two reasons as an actual subject. One, it is actually the last car that Lotus ever won Grand Prix with in 1987. It first won at Monaco, this car, in this iteration, but I'll explain more in a moment. And it also won just a few weeks later, 3 weeks later I think it was, in Detroit, and that was the last ever win for Lotus in Formula 1, sadly. One thing that's slightly amiss with this, it's not amiss, it's typical with Tamiya as well, I'm afraid, but this yellow livery that the car has, it's actually the yellow of the Camel cigarette company, and normally it would have the Camel logos on it, and of course because of tobacco advertising bans that's no longer allowed. So there's a bit of an irony here. Those of you that are very sharp-eyed will realise that they put Lotus up the side on the decals, which is not right for the Monaco Grand Prix, and it would have carried, at that race, it would have carried its normal Camel logos. It is the right markings, however, for the British and German Grand Prix, where cigarette advertising was by that time already banned anyway, and that's exactly as it would have appeared, except you can't simply say, well, it's the British Grand Prix, because it's got the deep rear wing for Monaco with the extra downforce. So this kit is not mine. It has been very generously loaned. Only loaned, sadly. Not that generous then. I'm joking. Well, a good friend of the channel, Ian Nichols, has lent it to us. And this is not a cheap kit. This is £250. So I am definitely wearing gloves. I'm definitely going to be very careful. We will open bags, but I think they're resealable. But we won't be opening any of those tiny parts that can get lost, because you don't need to see those. It's the same old thing. The really interesting stuff is in the quality, really, just to see how it compares to something like Meng and Tamiya, and having experienced those kits myself, it's going to be very interesting for me. I mentioned there were two things special about the car. I didn't quite finish what I was saying. The second thing that is special is this was the first ever Formula 1 car to win a Grand Prix with active suspension, computer controlled, hydraulically controlled active suspension, controlled by onboard electronic computer systems with sensors, and this is one of the reasons it was so successful at Monaco and Detroit in particular. It wasn't the best looking Lotus racing car of all time, and it wasn't the lightest. Colin Chapman would probably not have been that impressed, but they did experiment with this back in 1983 actually, but never raced it. By 87 they pretty much perfected the technology just about, and it was very successful on those street circuits, which were very bumpy, and this gave Senna a very smooth ride. If you watch any of the footage you can see on YouTube of him doing laps at Monaco, the two things that strike you is how smooth it seems. It's really smooth considering the speeds he's going at, you know. And when you see later footage from 88, 89 with non-active cars, you can see how bumpy it is and how dramatic it all looks. But it's like a magic carpet, so it really was clever technology, and it certainly helped give Lotus an edge at those street circuits, and that's why they won there. That and Ayrton Senna, of course. Now I just want to start by saying about that race, I have mentioned this in the past, something of a Formula 1 historian me. Senna he became the king of Monaco, and he actually won even more Monaco races than Graham Hill, who was previously called the king of Monaco. Ironically, this car at Monaco, being honest, although despite the advantages I've mentioned, it wouldn't have actually won because it was running in second place, and an increasing gap was developing, because Nigel Mansell was in the Williams Honda FW11B, and he was on imperious form at that race, as he was with quite a few of the races that year. But typical, for the era, reliability was a big factor then. And Nigel's had a failure of his exhaust system, which basically stopped the turbo from working on one side. I think it was on this side. And I think it was actually the feeder pipe from the manifold to the turbo. So it just drops his turbo pressure to nothing. And you could see he suddenly started slowing up. And he was being passed by slower cars. And then Senna caught him at the chicane next in the the harbour chicane. And he exits and overtakes him in this rather dramatic bit of footage. And Mansell comes in very dejected into the pits and shakes his head. And he was very unlucky at Monaco, Mansell was. He just... So many times he should have won that race. He should have won it in 91, he should have won it in 87, he should have won it in 92. And there's always something came up and thwarted him. He was very unlucky. It wasn't just him though. Derek Warwick, both the Arrows Megatron cars, they were out as well with reliability problems. Prost car with the tag turbo Porsche engine, which was normally pretty reliable, that went up in smoke as well, and he ended up parking at Rascasse, which I thought was strange because he was almost at the pit lane entry. He didn't feel he could make it. So it was a very interesting race. Senna made quite a late pit stop, and he had the legs of Nelson Piquet. Piquet was never liked Monaco. Piquet. He's often said so. He always complained that it was like, he compares driving around Monte Carlo to cycling around your living room at home. And he never has been quite. He did win it one year, didn't he? I can't remember. 83. I remember his film in there, but he never loved it as much as people like Senna, and Mansell loved it, but just couldn't win there. He's just unlucky. Anyway, point of the story is, it was a little bit fortuitous, but then again, Senna's brilliance put him in that position to inherit that win once Mansell dropped out, and he did. In the end, there was a convincing gap at the end, so he did a brilliant job with it. And of course, when he got to Detroit, it was even more convincing, because that's a very bumpy circuit. So let's have a look what we got then. So this is from Beemax, this 12 scale. Now Beemax now known as Nunu, I think these days, aren't they? Now this has been, they call it the vintage selection. It's been kind of reissued. I'll zoom in a bit. So let's have a little look at this. Get my zoomy to work. Perhaps just take the light down a little bit. There we go. That's better. So the one thing that I mentioned about these decals, so it's not got the correct. It shouldn't say Lotus. It should normally say Camel. You've got here the CABC, which stands for Colin Anthony Bruce Chapman. Colin Chapman, the founder of the company, who sadly died of a heart attack in December '82. So we never got to see this active suspension technology racing, sadly. It's got the V6 Honda, I think it's the RE130 engine, we'll get to that in a minute. And it's got the 1987 later type single pop-off valve, which was, in '87 it was rated at 4 bar, quite high pressure. And they really had some power. These things were generating anything up to 1300 horsepower. There's a rumour that Williams had 1400 horsepower on their engine in qualifying. I don't know if that's true or not, but they went like the wind. But obviously, just zoom you back actually, the one thing that is needed in addition on this kit really is a little bit of aftermarket to get the decals right, and Ian has already organised that. And he's actually, I just remember now what he said, he's actually ordered it from a company called Spot Model. I think they're in Europe, and but he's had it on back order for a while. In fact, we've delayed doing this review because he said, oh, these parts are on order. Well, I think that they are, it's quite a low run, I think, in terms of, I think this is only a low run as well, because this is £250, so it's not a cheap kit, and it's not one of Senna's most famous cars, but it is very significant, and it's certainly significant as Lotus's last winner in Formula 1. But he's had to back order this, and it looks like it's going to be some time. I think they have to, the manufacturers are probably waiting until they get, a couple of hundred or something to make it worth their while to produce them. And the kit he's ordered includes carbon fibre decals, it includes the Camel sponsor logos, photo etch for things like the linkages for the gear change linkage, all that kind of stuff, because this is before the flappy paddles came in. Still got a gear linkage on the right. And just a general detailing up around the engine bay, some extra parts there as well. Things like decals for the Goodyear tyres, stuff like that. Anyway, without enough talking, let's have a look at what we got here. So, show you on the side, and it's actually got some photos of the kit. Finished model, I should say, so let's have a look at that, because they look rather nice. Now, I'm going to have to take my time here, because it's a beautiful thing, and I don't want to do any damage to it in any way at all. But look at this. That's the finished model. You can see it's carbon fibre tub there, and here you can see the we've got the Honda engine over here. Whoops, let's move it across a little bit more. There we are. Let's have the light back on actually. There we are. So yeah, you can see that there's a lot of detail in this model. A lot of detail. This is really for advanced modelers, this one. And it says about the kit. This is a plastic model assembly kit and depicts the 1990 Lotus model developed by Team Lotus for the 1987 Formula 1 Grand Prix season. With the full cooperation of classic Team Lotus, who of course run these old Formula 1 cars, under Clive Chapman, Colin's son today. 1/12 scale, it's got a length of 355mm and a width of 183mm. It produced, to reproduce the winning car of the 1987 Monaco Grand Prix, well it would be if it had the right decals, but we've already covered that. The V6 turbo engine and all other accessories are faithfully reproduced, marking as number 12 that won the Monaco Grand Prix. It doesn't mention Ayrton SENNA, but he, I can assure you, was the man. Do we have any details about dates here? About manufacturing date? I think it came out in the 90s, to be honest, this one, but it doesn't seem to give a date that I can spot anyway. On the other side, we get a little bit more info. You've got the sort of plan view of the car there, bit of a write-up, and then a shot of it as it looks. So it's quite a bulky car, really, relatively speaking, by Lotus standards. But then it has to be to accommodate all this extra gizmos and electronics and things. And you can see it there, sort of cutaway view with those air scoops for the turbos, for the turbo intercoolers. Anyway, I'll zoom you back and I'll give you the full spiel that we have on the side, because I'm trusting that they're going to give us a bit more info. It says about the 1990 Monaco Grand Prix winner in 1987. This car was developed by Team Lotus for the 1987 World Championship. Yes, I said that running. Team Lotus has always led by adopting new technologies and ideas, and for this model they worked on the 1990 to incorporate active suspension technology. The active suspension used an onboard computer to analyse data from sensors equipped on each part of the vehicle in different corners. Based on this data, the hydraulically actuated computer-controlled active suspension system always maintains optimal vehicle stability. So it's to maintain the ride height to give maximum downforce is what it's really about, and also give a smooth ride. Developed and designed by Gérard Decaroux, the 99T car chassis followed the design of the 98T up until the previous year, which was powered by a 1.494 cc, so 1.5 litre, water-cooled 80-degree V6, equipped with twin turbos, an engine that produced over 1,000 horsepower, and the rest. The 99T, equipped with the strongest engine and this advanced technology, won the legendary Monaco Grand Prix, adding a new page to the history of Formula 1. So there you go, first ever victory for an active suspension technology car. Well, without further ado, it's got a load of references for colours. It's only showing Mr. Colour though. Oh no, I'm wrong, sorry, I beg your pardon. Mr. Colour, Aqueous Hobby, or Tamiya are the colours it recommends. Fair enough. So let's have a look at this. It's something I've never seen on these Beemax, not a big one before, so this is going to be quite new. And I've got to be very, very gentle and careful with this model. So please bear with me, because I'll be taking my time. Oh, okay. It's actually a bit like the Tamiya layout, isn't it? It's very like the Tamiya layout. In fact, it's more than very like it. That's a dead copy of it. I've just realised, look at that. That's exactly like my McLaren MP4 and the Ferrari instruction book is. Shows the finished model, and it has lots of photos of the real thing in different components. Exactly what Tamiya did. So I think they've taken the concept from Tamiya. That's clear. Oh my goodness. So what we've got here, we'll look at the parts later. Let's start with this. Is there anything else I need to take out? The body shell there. It'd be interesting to see how good the quality of the parts are, because if you remember, a lot of people are frightened of these kind of models. So I'm just going to have a swig of coffee, excuse me for a second. I want to keep it out of the way, that's all. A lot of people are frightened of these kind of models because of the high finishes required to really make them look good and realistic. But as I mentioned in one of my previous videos a couple of years ago, I kind of cheated my way to victory with some of these, because in the case of the McLaren, the white plastic on the Tamiya kit was so perfect. All I did was I spray painted from Rattle Can the Dayglow red, and I didn't bother with the white because it was so perfect. It was just going to make it worse, and it just looks brilliant. Honestly, it looks great. But you can only do that if you've got perfect plastic with no, you don't want any marks in it, or moulding marks or shadows in the plastic. You can't do it, then you just need to paint over it. But if it's that good, you can get away with it, and I did the same with the Ferrari. Anyway, I'm going to move this over here because I want to, in an effort to keep everything together, we're just going to, I think, gently pop that there, and we'll zoom you in on this. So let's have a nosy now. It's quite nice for me because I know quite a lot about the subject matter. The things that have included, the way they've done the packaging, it's going to be quite refreshing. But remember, this is £250, and the detail upset that Ian has ordered is another, I think it's about €122. I think it's about £100 extra. But if you want to make it actually look like the Monaco winner, then you sort of have to do that to get the camel logo. So there's not much you can do really. In some respects, it's a pity it didn't win the British Grand Prix. I'm like, well, that would mean Nigel Mansell not winning. But it would have been easier to then to get around this problem. They could have just run with those, with the Silverstone lower downforce wing, and they could have left these decals as they are. Anyway, enough waffle. Let's have a look at this. So, it doesn't seem to give any. Oh, it does. It does give us some nice detail, actually. Okay, well, that's really excellent. There's actually quite a lot of background info here. It goes into great detail. Really does go into excellent detail. And it's clearly done by a Japanese chap as well. I won't read it all out because I've already given you the sort of background, and a lot of it will be replicating it. Yeah, Senna came in third at the British Grand Prix behind the two Williamses. Anyway, Beemax, let's have a look at what they've got for us. So, a little bit of chat about the... That's quite interesting the way they worded that, isn't it? Japanese, English, Spanish, and then Tamiya's reference for them all. And Mr. Hobby as well at the beginning. Anyway, there's going to be lots of screws and nuts and bolts, very Tamiya style. So you get provided with a screwdriver. You're going to start working on what looks like the whole engine and gearbox is one casing as one part. Screwing in your lower supports for the attachment points for the suspension. And we've got a nut going in there. I think it's going to fix into the chassis with a screw and a nut. And then we've got several of these, already looks like the active suspension connectors for the sensors. So they're into that already. Here we've got turning it upside down, the right way up I should say. You've then got the front of the engine with the top of the gearbox here, bringing all that together. And then we've got, this is basically the intake, the top of the engine, basically the kind of the plenum chamber and injection system going in. You've got the top of the cam covers here with the Honda logo on it. And here indeed we've got the injection system, a high pressure fuel injection fuel rail for both sides. Looks like probably a high pressure fuel pump there, I think. And over here we've clearly got an oil pump. I'm saying oil pump. I think again that is to do with the. I think these components are to do with the hydraulics for the suspension system. And then we've got a whole series of brackets that are going to be fitted, metal brackets clearly, with screws, and this is to mounting all the rear suspension points. You've got a support then that looks like it's the one for end of the gearbox. I think that's the back of the gearbox here. Gearbox cap with complete the rain light. Then we've got our dampers. It's fairly straightforward. It doesn't look overly detailed. I've seen much more detailed and overcrowded kits in the last few weeks than this. So you've got dampers, springs, looks like proper springs. I'm sure that'd be nice. Then you've got your springs assembly, damper assembly going in, and your upper arms and your drive shafts, complete with the universal joint covered, obviously, rubber boots on them. Then we've got our wishbone suspension arms going in here, and all the fixings underneath, and you can see that they've got brackets on them. It's going to be quite strong, but it's very like the Tamiya style, isn't it? Then we've got the gearbox oil cooler assembly. Oh, and I've just realised, sorry, I wasn't paying attention myself. It actually tells you at the top here what it's telling you stuff. I'm just looking and interpreting, but it does actually say gearbox oil cooler assembly. So this is nice that they include some description, which is so lacking on a lot of kits from the Far East. That's really excellent. And yes, there's your gearbox oil cooler, which sits right on top of the gearbox. And then we're getting into the disc brakes. I don't know if you get in that detail upset whether you get some disc brakes, discs faces, because that would be nice. But having said that, you've got to remember that these cars are running carbon ceramic, so they're not drilled or anything like on my Le Mans Porsche like they were in the 60s. These are, they're just a carbon finish, so plastic is actually fine to replicate that as long as you get the finish right. Then we've got, so it's our rear disc, wheel hub and disc assembly, and that's going to go in then, attaching into your drive shafts, and then you're going to fix they've got the brake intakes there, of course, as well, cooling intakes. Then we're getting into our turbochargers themselves. So the small one is the exhaust. I think I always get this wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's right this time. The small one is the exhaust, and that basically drives the turbo, and the big one is the intake. And these are big turbos compared to what I use today. These are really huge. And I think they were running IHI turbos, if I remember correctly, from the Japanese turbochargers. Whereas things like the Le Mans Porsches were running KKK turbos. So the different horses for courses, really. But you've clearly there got your wastegate. That's your wastegate actuator. This thing here, and the dump valve. That's the dump valve. Yeah, and then it attaches to the exhaust manifold. This is what went wrong on Nigel Mansell's car. I think it was basically this component that cracked. Started a fracture or some manufacturing defect, but you do that for both sides. Then here you're going to add that exhaust and turbo assembly in to the side of the engine. Basically the exhaust manifold just goes straight into the exit of the cylinders, of course. And then we're building our chassis. So now we've got the bottom of the cockpit and the pedal box. And a fire extinguisher, of course, there as well in the middle. C10, that's the fire extinguisher. You've got your pedal box with your brake reservoir, etc. And then you've got a couple of these. These are push rod, aren't they? I think there's a push rod assembly for the suspension. And then we've got the front bulkhead, complete with the dampers. Very conventional stuff, this, for the time anyway. And you've got your steering rack going through there. You've got your little springs and damper assembly being put together, and you've got the two sides of the monocoque complete with all the brackets. So there's a lot of screws in this kit. There's a lot of screws. This is more than a Tamiya kit. So you're actually screwing the cockpit together as well. So it's quite. It'll feel a bit like me with that motorbike, the Tamiya motorbike, where you're doing a lot of work that feels like building the real thing, really, rather than just a plastic model with glue. And here you've got things like the linkages that I talked about earlier, which I think that Ian had ordered as part of his set. I think that they come with some of these linkages come maybe this end and maybe at the gearbox end as well, as a metal linkage instead of plastic. But there you're building in the inner sort of tub, complete with one of these will be a drinks tube, one will be oxygen in case of fire. Then we've got our seat belts. So we've got seat belts provided as well. You've got your steering wheel complete with decals and your instruments, and then you actually popping these into the seat itself. So that's the seat just drops straight in there. Then you've got your wishbones, front wishbones all going in here. Lots of screws. Everything's screwed together, which it looks great. To be honest, yeah, I'm liking the look of this. I think it'd be right up my street, this would. And then you've got your front brakes and your hubs going together. Inner hubs and the intakes for the brakes and the calipers, of course. All your front uprights complete with the aerodynamic shrouding, which goes around here just to try and cut down the drag. and obviously those all get screwed together there. Then you've got your electrical parts assembly, and these are the parts it's usually mounted just behind the driver or under the roll hoop, because it's very cool there. And this is controlling all things like, I think there's two here. One's for the Honda engine, and one I think is for the brain. I think for the hydraulic active suspension, complete with the radio set. You've got a radio antenna there as well for telemetry, in-car to pits telemetry. And you've got your roll hoop itself going on there. You've got quite a few little bits of detail you need to pick out here. This is where the other thing Ian talked about was it needs this, it really does need this carbon fibre decals to really make it look right on the monocoque, because it's all carbon fibre. But getting that right isn't always easy. A lot of manufacturers make the weave look too big, and it should be quite fine really, especially at this scale. And then we're screwing all this into the engine gearbox. It's going to be screwed into the floor, and then likewise lots of screws. There really are dozens and dozens of them. And then you're going to do the same with that front monocoque and tub. It's going to be screwed in, and then you fix obviously there's brackets to fix the gearbox. The engine and the engine and the monocoque are bolted together because it becomes a complete single stress member, of course, and it's been like that since the 60s, early 60s, since Colin Chapman first did it on the Lotus 49, I think I'm right in saying. And then we're going to start working on our radiators and intercooler intakes, complete with all the gubbins and the tubes and piping, which again you can really lift. Models like this can really be lifted by taking your time on things like this and just doing your detailing work, a little bit of tiny bits of weathering. And when I say weathering, I'm talking about like in a World War II aircraft. It's more highlighting and dry brushing, which can really help it. Just lift it a little bit. Here we've got again various pumps and sensors and pumps that are going in just ahead of the radiators. And of course, in the case of the intercooler, the charge cooler I should call it. The charge cooler is really for the turbochargers, and the idea is it's driven the intake side of the turbo, the big side. It forces air into the engine that's charge cooled from this radiator, so it's very cool. Gives maximum compression value, if you like, explosion, ideal for the kind of spark they're trying to achieve to give maximum power. And here it is. There's even a bit of mesh here that goes on the front of the intake. So this is the conventional radiator, and this is the charge cooler that's for the turbo. So one is for cooling the water to keep the engine cool, and one is to keep the air cool that goes into the turbo. So your intake air is at, I don't know what temperature it would be. I think it's pretty cold. I think it's only about 4 or 5 degrees. It's probably what they're aiming for. Really cool air, like in a cool morning. A chilly morning, but not a frosty one. That sort of temperature. Then all these various radiators go in, and then you've got lots and lots of tubing, which obviously they're going to produce within the kit, provide, I should say. And you've got to cut them to the right lengths here, make sure they're all correctly lengthed. And then they go into various sensors and valves and connectors. And then you get onto the actual pop-off valve on the plenum chamber for the turbos. They call it the log, and this is the 4-bar FIA controlled pop-off valve. So the valve, which is that part G71, that is provided by the FIA, and Lotus and anybody else are not allowed to touch that, and it's regulated and checked by the FIA during that season. And this was at 4 bar, which is quite high pressure, and then they dropped it the following year to 2.2 bar, I think it was, and they had twin pop-off valves. As you saw on the McLaren, in fact. And here we've got the actual the air chamber assembly. So this is the intake, basically, pipe for the air scoops that are going to ultimately take the air into the turbo and engine itself. And there they are. There are the scoops themselves. So the air goes in there, and it goes through the turbo, pushed through the charge cooler, and then ultimately into this assembly here. And then ultimately into the past the injection system, gets fuel added into the cylinders, and then the spark plugs ignites the fuel, and off we go. Front wing assembly. They're quite simple then, to be honest. Although I do note it's got like a lower flap that's parallel to the ground, which I don't think the Williams had in '87. They didn't. They had a similar end plate shape, but they didn't have that underpiece, which is interesting. They did have it later. And then you've got your Monaco, and this is the important part I talked about earlier, the Monaco spec rear wing. And this is a very deep multi-element rear wing. So it's got 3 elements plus a gurney flap, the little tiny flap that's at the top. That's like almost like a little rail. It just gives the maximum drag. You want maximum drag at Monaco. You've got plenty of power for this engine, and that drag equates to downforce and gives you more speed through the corners. And don't forget, one corner, the Lowe's or Fairmont corner as they call it now, is only 30 miles an hour at maximum speed. So you need as much downforce as you can get. And here's the slightly unfortunate Lotus logo, which is not really strictly accurate for that race, but it was used in Germany and Silverstone. Okay, now to the main top body, the body cover. And here we've got the intakes for the radiators, the shrouding. You've got your mirrors going on there, and then basically that just comes down on top of the rest of the chassis. Again, lots of screws to put it all together, which is excellent. Then you've got tyres. It looks like the wheels are in one piece. Wheels and tyres going on, and there's a decal there for the Goodyear logos. I'd be very tempted with experience now. I've often used these decals, but they do need replacing about every 10 years, so I'd be very tempted to go with a stencil and spray them on, to be honest. And then we're going to put our wheels and tyres onto the car chassis. Then finally tighten up the wheel nuts with our little special, very Tamiya style. I've got special nuts, and you tighten it up with the tool provided. And there we have our finished Lotus 99T ready to start the Monaco Grand Prix. And then on the back we have our sprue mat. Well, you can see the heavy influence of Tamiya all over this, which is not a bad thing, and don't blame them for at all. Why not copy the best in terms of the way you approach the manufacturing and even the instructions? I like that. It's pretty clear. It doesn't look overly complicated. Bearing in mind it is a very complicated machine, but it doesn't look overly busy or confusing. It looks good. So let's look at the plastic now. We're not going to open any of these tiny bags because Ian doesn't want me to, and I wouldn't do anyway, to be honest, because we don't want those to get lost and start flying about. But I think most of the bags are in resealable, so let's have a look. Now, speaking of someone who's built these models before, these types of models, very similar ones, it's going to be really interesting to just see their take on it versus Tamiya in particular. So we've got 3 parts in here. Beemax Macau 2022 is actually dated. Okay, so let's zoom you in. I'll get this so we can see it properly for you. Whoops, he says. I'm going to have to move that box. It's just a little bit in our vision. Isn't it? Let's just try and get that out of the way. That's a bit better. So this is the bottom. This is the bottom of the chassis. Under the nose section where the tub is. Look at all the many holes, many of which are going to have screws in them. That's the underneath of it, so it's nice and smooth, because they have a flat bottom, don't forget these. In this era they were completely flat bottom. There was no ground effect tunnels allowed, only the diffuser was allowed to be ground effect. So that's that. It's very chunky, it's quite solid plastic. Then we've got our wheels, which were Dimag wheels in reality. Well, those are nice, aren't they? Look at the depth of them. Yeah, got those, and then I think it makes sense for me to get the tyres out and show you those at the same time. Actually, just bear with me. They come in this rather nifty-looking box that's like a trolley with the tyres on. Isn't that cool? Okay, oh yeah, they are all packed together. Oh, these look rather nice. Now, can we take them out? Yes, we can. The bag is open. Right, so first of all we've got a front tyre, and made in the USA. Yeah, it's the Goodyear, of course. So they've done that pretty well. I like the way they've got the little nicks in them, which is part of the moulding process, I think, isn't it? I think it's also where they stick a pyrometer into it when they're trying to check the temperatures. It has got a seam, of course, up the middle, so you just need to take care of that with probably with a Dremel, with a fine sanding wheel on it, just to take that away. But that's nicer than the Tamiya ones in terms of the finish, because theirs are often a bit glossy and toy-like on the surface, I think. So that is very nice. So that's the small front wheel. Let's have a look at one of the rears. They're much bigger, of course. So here's the rear. Let's move this for 1 second. There we go. Here's the rear tyre. And again, very similar, isn't it? Very beautifully done. Just needs that seam taken care of. But I like the way they've got the little nicks in them, like the real tyre have, right the way across the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's part of the moulding process. I think it's basically when it comes out of the mould, isn't it, where it's attached. Those are very nice. Those are very nice. So you get those and those together. Now they are black on this car, so they're not the most characterful in terms of catching the eye. And you're listening to a person who doesn't like black wheels very much on real cars. I'm not a big black wheel fan. Black alloy wheels, I don't think. They just look dirty to me, even when they're not. It just looks like somebody who wants black wheels because they don't want to clean their wheels, you know what I mean? Anyway, let's just put those back for Ian. So those are really nice. Super tyres, aren't they? Can't fault them. It's going to be quite tricky to get back in. Being a bit bigger, it's quite a tight fit, in fact. There we go, go in there. These won't be a problem because those are a bit smaller. Well, so far it's looking pretty good. So the next thing I'm going to look at this floor, which is the main floor of the car, which is, as I mentioned, is flat. And this is before they brought in the barge boards, because they just used to have a flat floor and they had to run titanium skid plates, which is why they, like today actually, which is why you get that sparking effect. So put those back in for Ian. Isn't that nice though? That, like a trolley, it's really cool, isn't it? It's quite imaginatively done, that, I think. Like a tyre trolley. It's cool. Right, I'll put that back in there for him. So that's that one. And the wheels, we can pop back in our bag. Tyre mag wheels. Make sure we can seal that for Ian. Okay, so the floor I mentioned, here we go. The plastic's really thick, I've got to say. Their plastic feels really rigid. So I hope we haven't got any issues like we had with the McLaren from Meng, which had, you remember, it had warped floor and a warped body, which I give all credit where it's due. Creative Models over in Cambridge sorted that out for us and got them replaced. But you can see here, can't you, the completely flat nature of the floor. And this is why they have these titanium skid plates, because every time they touch the ground. Less of a factor on the Lotus with its active suspension, of course, but on most of the cars, you get a lot of sparking and touching. And it would do real damage to the car if they were to be rubbing away bits of the floor, and potentially making it illegal as well. So that's very nice indeed. So yes, excellent there. And was there... did that have its own bag, folks, or did I just take that out? And, where's the bag for that? Because I'm sure they were together, weren't they? That one and that one. No, they were actually really squeezing. Right, I'll leave that on one side. So, next thing I think we can't avoid, I think we should look at the actual bodywork. The main body, top body, and the monocoque. So again, we'll handle this very carefully. Now, this is where we get to the critical bit I was talking about. How good is the plastic from Beemax? I'm slightly disappointed only in that this is nice looking moulding. Just a bit disappointed they've chosen to go for a glossy finish for the tub, which is clearly should be matte in carbon fibre. So it's not an issue if you're going to do it as Ian and probably most of us would do, is to put these carbon fibre decals on, but you kind of got to, haven't you, because they've got it all glossy. So that's a bit of a strange choice, because on the McLaren from Tamiya, that's not glossy, that's a real matte finish. It's a very, almost like a very fine knurled finish. But this is totally shiny gloss, which is not correct and not realistic. So that's I think it would have been better if they'd have gone for a matte finish than that, actually. So that's a bit weird. Now, as I mentioned, it's not the prettiest looking Lotus ever. It's quite deep. It's got this very high, deep nose. When you look at cars like the Lotus 79, they're much more elegant. But it has a beauty of its own, really. So if I just have an interest, if I just match this with yeah, don't forget these are actually screwed together. So yeah, you can see straight away there that the fit is good. Can't see any warping problems like we had with that main McLaren. Whoops. Can't see any warping issues at all. It's got these these are just strengthening bars that you remove here. Those are bits of sprue in effect. But it's nice. The plastic quality is good. It does have a couple of little mould marks. This is just within the plastic itself, not on the surface there. And again here, I'm just wondering where that is in relation to the decals. I think there's a decal goes over there, so you might be able to get away with that. I think that the lazy amongst you, and this includes me, could actually maybe just get away with this kit without having to paint the yellow, which I know is very lazy, and there'll be some people tutting and shaking their heads saying he's not a proper modeler. I can assure you now, if you look at my Gulf Porsche, that's completely painted, or that motorbike, they're all completely painted. But when you've got large expanses, especially with a very high gloss finish that you're trying to achieve, I'm not really sure that you absolutely have to if the plastic's as good as this. And apart from those two minor issues, there's nothing really. It's a bit more matte on that side, isn't it? Is it? It's just a bit of an illusion. Seems a little bit less matte. It's like a matted finish around this area where the intake for the radiator is. But on that side it looks a lot more matte still. Can you tell? See that? Anyway, it's very nice plastic indeed. No complaints really, I've got to be honest. 2022 Macau, and obviously this goes on top like so, like that. The fit seems to indicate that it's going to be pretty good. So I'm going to pop that back in the bag. I'm going to pop it back with the floor because I think they should be together actually. Let's just pop them back like so. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Let's just zoom you back so you're not looking at nothing. Got to take my time a little bit here, and I can't just thrash through it when it's somebody else's pride and joy, especially such an expensive kit. They are not cheap, are they? My goodness, they are not. Right, back in there nicely. It's protected. Right, now then, some more yellow parts. So these are body coloured, and again we've got a nice resealable bag, I believe it says. Where is it then? There it is, sort of hiding. Yeah, it's interesting in this race, if you watch the race, you can see it on YouTube, BBC covered it, and Senna said after the race, he said, I didn't expect to win, to be honest. He said, well, I had a really good night's sleep and I felt very cheerful and relaxed this morning. Thought I'd come in second. He said, and I couldn't believe my luck, but Nigel Mansell broke down, So here you go. This is these are the intakes, or sometimes called trumpets or funnels. These are the ones that stick up through the side pod, and actually are intakes for the air for the turbocharger and charge cooler system. And here you've got a couple of the bits of bodywork which guide some of the air in, which is all very nice. And then we've got so Beemax very proudly say Macau, by the way, on their sprues. So it's Macau, not far from Hong Kong there, is it? And here's your multi-element now. Here now what I was just saying about beautiful plastic and you can get away with not painting it, well I don't think you can here, because there's a few flaws just in the plastic have crept in that mould, I think. And that would be pretty visible, unless you can get the camel logos covering it up. So that might be a side step. It's certainly something to consider. A little bit of cheating doesn't go amiss, I think. As long as it looks realistic at the end. I mean, what I would do, I probably wouldn't paint it, but I would put a high gloss coat over the top to seal in the decals, and that will just give it that That'll give the impression it's been painted. It'll fool the eye if you do it well. So there's your rear wing and the side wing plates. And then we have the front wing components here, these end plates I talked about, which have this sort of a flap which dives underneath a little bit. It's a little bit different to the Williams, a little bit different, perhaps a little bit more advanced even actually in that one respect. And then here you've got in one piece the main front wing element. And that's also got a gurney flap. This is only be used at Monaco or Detroit, I suspect. Got this gurney flap, and if you can see that, the final little lip. Can you see that? A gurney flap here, lip on the top, just to give that final bit of drag, downforce in fact. Trying to increase the amount of resistance as much as possible. And then you've got your actual elements here for underneath. Sorry, it's for the top, isn't it? That's the top element. Again, not so perfect coming out of the mould, or a little bit scratching perhaps. Again, that's not quite as... I think the problem we've got here, I think there's a difference in the finish. Can you see? There's a bit of variation in the finishes, quite glossy, not so glossy. And that's, none of that is as glossy as that top bodywork I've just shown you. So a little bit of variation has crept into the manufacturing process, which I think will limit what you can do in terms of painting or not painting. So if you get to the stage where it's too difficult to not paint, you just paint everything. You know, I'm not saying you shouldn't paint, I'm not saying that at all, but there's a lot of people who put off this kit because they don't think that they're up to painting it, and I say to them, don't be. If you got a cheap, as long as it looks nice when you finished it, don't let it spoil your fun to that level. Problem with my bagging here, sorry. It's quite cumbersome and there's a lot of big parts to manage here, sorry about that. So yeah, you've got a little bit of variation in that bag in terms of the finish. Some of it's glossy, some of it's a bit matty. Yeah, that just gives some potential issues if you didn't want to paint. So again, you could always use my system of putting just a gloss coat over the top, but if it's got big variations, they're still probably going to show up. What's that? Is that fire extinguisher? Clear parts. So the clear parts are... can't be the fire extinguisher, I'm not sure what that is actually. Well, obviously we've got the rear light, the safety light that they have on the back of the gearbox. Rain light, we sometimes call it, because in a wet race they have to have the light on. So the other car, in the spray, they can see ahead and see that there's a car there. And then there's something else, which I'm not sure if it's... I think it's part of the active suspension actually, like a valve. But the nice little parts, no problems there. Then we've got this intriguing little box which looks like a suitcase. Can you see that? It's got a suitcase handle on it. How interesting. And this is it's like a toolbox. So they made it like a toolbox, not a suitcase. I'm misinterpreting it. It's a toolbox, isn't it? Like in a pit garage. Let's have a look what that's all about. It does look quite intriguing. Now, I've got to be very careful with the opening of this. Okay, so this is going to be a lot of these little parts. Now, we'll have a little look, but we won't open any bags, okay? We don't want them flying around. Oh yes, there are many small parts. Look at this. So, look at that. So there you've got nuts, you've got the suspension springs, you've got the mesh, many screws, a lot of screws. Bags of all sorts. You've got some really long screws there. You see those? Very long sill ones. A lot of tiny parts in here. So we're not going to open this bag at all because we don't want to unleash the genie out of the bottle. So we'll pop that back in the box for you. Then we've also got some tubing. I think this is for some of that suspension stroke hydraulic system we talked about. You can see there, nice bit of tubing. And then we've got some wire and some other tubing which gets used in around the engine and around the brakes and also around the electronics elements, the connectors, Go into some of those sensors as well for the suspension. Pop that in there as well. And then here, now this one I might just open because this is little suspension arms and wishbones and things. Now I believe, are they metal? I'm not going to try pushing my luck. We all know what my history's like when I start to put pressure on anything. Snap is the answer. But it kind of feels like metal. I think it's ABS. I think they've gone for ABS rather than metal because it just doesn't feel quite the right. Yeah, it's a very, very hard ABS plastic. So that's the way they've gone, I think, here. In suspension arms. Let's look at the other one, just a shorter one, just to see if that... Yeah, it's ABS. It's really tough stuff, though. I think it's more than up to the job, because sometimes metal's quite hard and you have problems painting it as well. So there's the wishbones. There's quite a few of these. It does make a noise a bit like metal. Am I wrong? It sounds like metal, doesn't it? No, it can't be. It's basically like an ABS type of material, but it's not obvious actually. It looks like plastic, but it sounds like metal. Very odd. Interesting, but it's more than strong enough to do what we needed to do anyway. So those are those, and we've also got within there. There's a little tool for. Oops, sorry. I need to see you back. Sorry about this. There's a small tool in here for. This is for doing up the wheel nuts. So there we go. So it's certainly an interesting take on it. They seem to have shied away from going the metal route and gone to something as good as, but lighter. You can tell it's not metal. It's not really heavy enough to be metal that bag. So there we go. So this is our little toolbox stroke briefcase, tool case. And of course, finally there was our nice little screwdriver, which is provided for you to actually do up all the many little screws. As you can see, that's very, very nice. It's basically a Phillips head design of screwdriver. So it goes in there as well. So pop that safely back in there for Ian. And take a shot over there, and then we get into all the sort of plastic parts and the. Look at this! Oh, Ian is spoiling us. I forgot about this. He's got a book on it. Look. Oh, this is going to take longer than I thought. Oh no! I love books. Right. Okay. Let me have just a quick look at these. There's a couple of extra leaflets in here. You can get an Ayrton Senna figure. For the Camel Lotus team. Although actually, if I'm being honest with you, that looks like 1980s Grand Prix driver. But the decals are a bit more, well, there's a bit of a mixture. I think they've tried to cover all the bases, but it does look like Senna. I've got to say, it's quite a good looking face reproduction. Yeah, not bad. There we go. Look at that. 12 scale figure. Nice. And then we have got this is a guide really for your decals and your stencils, where they should all go. And then we've got the actual decals themselves, which I think it would be nice to take a look at them actually, so we'll have a look at these. Zoom you back. Whew. This is always going to be quite a long review because again it's very expensive and very big kit with a lot of elements to it, multimedia, lots and lots of parts. Didn't notice any part count, but I'm guessing it's about 400 parts at least. So let's very carefully look at these because we want to look at these seat belts. Reporter was a fashion brand in the 1980s, if I recall correctly. They made shirts and things. It's like a style house, fashion house. I think I'm right in saying that. Reporter. There you go. And there's your seat belts. So you just cut them out. They're actually pre-cut. Well, take them off obviously, but they're kind of pre-cut, die-cut. You just take them off, and use as appropriate. Then we've got decals that you probably will be using, these ones, including your instrumentation for the dashboard. Got the Lotus and the FIA logos there as well. That's quite cool, isn't it? Okay, so this is, when I thought they were telling you to paint, they were telling you to put that decal around where the refueling top of the fuel tank is. And you've got all these little eyelets that go around all the carbon fibre bits, strengthening points. There's quite a few of those, my lord. It's going to take a while, isn't it? You've got your Brembo brake stickers for the calipers. And then of course we've got our Goodyear Eagle decals for the tyres. As I say, they'll probably be fine, you know, but I warn you, if you do build one of these, in 10 years time you'll be coming back because they'll flake off. They always happen. And then finally on the decals we've got a lot of stickers that you're probably not really going to use. Some you will, a lot you won't. The DeLonghi ones, DeLonghi did heaters and air conditioning units, didn't they? One of Senna's own sponsors, I think. And the Colin, Anthony, Bruce Chapman logos, yes. But these ones that say Lotus, most of those are not used. Not at Monaco. Not at Monaco. These you will use, the powered by Honda. And the Elf, yes, they're all used. And you've got the Senna name there, just in case you're in any doubt. Also got some Philips adverts, I didn't know that. And you see at the bottom left there, Lotus Active. That's cool, isn't it? So the first win for an active car in the history of Formula 1. There you go. I'll just very carefully pop those back in. And we will have a look at these engine parts and turbos and things, all the really exciting stuff. All the Formula 1 geeks like me are going to love this. For sure. He says, got into that problem zone with the resealable bag, haven't I? This is the authorised method of how you do it. You just get it in at one side like so, lift it, and then you just drop it in like that. And you don't get the stickiness on anything because it's still stuck to the desk. Gently remove it, and we reseal that for Ian. Very nice of him to let me have a look at this model. I'm very impressed. Have a look at the book at the end, I think. Keep going with the kit, we'll have a look at that last. I think that's going to be brilliant. Okay, so going to find the resealing bit. We have a knack of putting this in there right at the top that you don't expect it to be. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at a lot of the cockpit sub parts, I think, in this bag. Take the time. Right. So yeah, we've got a diffuser and everything. Right, here we go. So. Just slightly disappointed to see so many ejector pin marks on the underneath of the diffuser. You'll see this in a second, trust me. You won't be able to miss it. Now then, that's quite a lot of ejector pin marks, I'd say. See that? Look at the number of them. There's a whole stack of them. Now, okay, it's underneath the car, you're not really going to look at it that much, but you're aware of it when you're building the model. On the top side, give them their due, on the top side that is more visible through the bodywork at the back, then yes, there aren't any. But yes, I'm not sure I like the way they've done that. I think that's going to need a little bit of cleanup, but it's a problem because it's on a very special, like a matte finished. See how it's glossy here and it's not here. It's like it's a bit like that monocoque I talked about, the carbon fibre on the Tamiya one, that sort of finish. So that's going to be a little bit problematic to clean up. Then we've got our seat, driver's seat, and again it doesn't matter about ejector pins on the back, that's never going to be seen under any circumstances. And then we've got our exhaust system here. He says, I'm going to focus. you. That would be very nice. Thank you. The exhaust system and this is part of the turbo inlet system. That's very nice. That's the first bit. Second part, where we've got huge, great big. Thank you. We've got these huge, great big intakes for the brakes. That's the rear brakes there. They're massive, aren't they? Absolutely huge. And then you've got your radiators, which they've actually moulded the finish, which is nice actually. They've done that really well. The actual radiator surface of all the elements. And then we've got Lotus. He says, focus isn't working today. I think it doesn't like the fact it's black. Lotus. This is on the braces that attach the engine. Attach the engine to the floor. I think I might be saying that. And then we've got some more of this trunking. You've got these ducting for the actual radiators themselves over there, and then you've got a couple of parts of the suspension, lower suspension here. All very nice, very nice. And then we've got some smaller parts. Now this is where we get into the real nitty-gritty details. So just move that. That's not helping us out here. Let's try and. There we go. So we've got all the small parts. You've got all the connectors. You've got various valves. You've actually got the gear knob here, where my finger is. That's the gear knob. Gear shifter. And tops of the dampers here, and the tops of the front, tops of the rear, and then you've got the universal joints here, the drive shafts themselves with their universal joints there, which look very cool, and lots of small parts, including the wheel nuts, which are these things here, and they have got this special, need that special tool I showed you to actually attach them. Then we have got our, looks like it's the FIA pop-off valve system is here. I think that's the cap end of it there. And then you've got the steering arms here and here. And of course you've got your wheel hubs. And they've got the Honda electronic control unit there. That's nice, isn't it? You see the Honda engraved in it? That's very cool. Yes, we're very impressed with that. That's a really nice sprue. Lots of small parts there. Just need to be just a bit careful when you clean up. Got some really finely moulded parts. Really exquisitely done, I think. There. So that's that. Try and get this back in my bag. It's never easy. There we go. So that's the first bag of quite a lot of the major parts to do with the Monaco, the cockpit tub area. That's that. And then we just have these two. Now I'm going to move this box out because it's actually causing more problems than it should. Just going to gently move that over there. Pop it in a way that should be safe. I think this is going to be a bit easier, and then we can have a look at this fantastic book, also from Spot Model. And then we've got some metallic, sort of silvery grey plastic, which is a throwback to the 1980s, really, isn't it, in some respects? So here, first of all, we've got all the seat belt parts, all the buckles for the seat belt. Check this out. These are very, very nicely done, I've got to be honest. Those look rather special, I would say. So you've got your main release here. Quick release, oops, put the way around. The quick release there, when you punch it, it'll release the belt, all the harness completely. And then you've got all your other tightening buckles here. And then you clip in belt clip-ins at the end that will go into the central buckle, central clasp I should say. That's very nice. So then you've got a lot of tiny stuff. I'm not even sure what these are, if I'm quite honest with you. He says, try and get some focus. There we go. Yeah, a lot of tiny parts there. I'm not even sure what those are. I really don't know. I think quite a lot of them are, it's almost like spark plugs, isn't it? They've got a really interesting look to them. I'm not sure what those are. And then we've got, this is part of the hydraulic system, the active suspension system, valves and control units. And then we've got all these engine parts. Now these I'm pretty sure are part of the fueling system. So we've got a lot of the unions basically for the injection system here, which are really, this is going to be quite a fiddly process, isn't it? There's a lot of work here. A lot of work. It's quite, I think it's going to be quite demanding. All these little tiny unions for the injection system that goes into the plenum chamber intake logs. Wow, that's a lot of tiny parts. It almost has that sort of look about it of tank tracks, doesn't it, really? You know, quite repetitive construction. But that is the nature of, you know, complicated machines, I guess. There's nothing to do about it. You have to replicate. It's just the nature of the beast. Gently. And we'll get that sealed up for Ian. Lovely. And then finally, the last bag of sprues. Big old kit, isn't it? I mean, I know a lot of people that don't, if you don't know much about Formula 1, it probably looks absolutely terrifying, really. But it's like anything, as I said, it's like a bit like tank tracks, you know. There are always going to be parts where there's a bit of repetition. You shouldn't let that put you off too much, because once you get into it, you know, and I think, I can imagine this was not a huge seller for Beemax, if I'm quite honest, because other than those of us who are massive enthusiasts at the time, it's sort of not such a famous car, is it? And yet it does deserve to be for the reasons stated, you know. First car ever to win with active suspension, well, that's very historic indeed. I should just add that Williams went on later that season, I think in Hungary, I could be wrong, but around about the Hungarian Grand Prix, they also introduced active suspension, and they ran it in the Italian Grand Prix as well, and it went wrong, and it jammed, and I think it was PK, was it, that got stuck? Or am I thinking of later in 91? I'm thinking of 91, aren't I? They did run it, I think PK ran it, I think he won one of the races with it, but then later they reintroduced it in 91 and it all went wrong in the Italian Grand Prix, and Riccardo Patrese stuck in the up position. It had this big ground clearance, but it didn't work too well. But anyway, sorry, I'm just working from memory there, so forgive me if I've slightly got the dates wrong. Now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of this, the Honda engine, which is so vital for this power of this vehicle, obviously. If you look very carefully here at the Honda, this is the top of the cam covers. You can clearly see the Honda logos, and that's really nicely moulded, isn't it? That's absolutely beautiful. You get your intakes for your front brakes there, and then you've got the top of the gearbox here and the mounting for the hydraulic system for the active suspension. And over here we've got that's the rear, I think that's the rear lower suspension mounting points. Got a couple of bulkheads here for that's the bulkhead for the front of the driver's footwell. And then you've got the end of the casing of the engine here, which I think I'm right in saying that will be I think that's the rear. Is that the rear or the front? I'm just trying to work from memory. I think that's the rear end and that's the front end. You can see the 60-degree V, can't you? It's there for all to see. Then you've got your instruments, which look really cool actually. This is the one that's has the decals on it. But that's going to look really nice, I think, once you've got the full effect of having all the instrumentation within it. And you've got two of these little charge coolers, You've got your steering wheel, have the Lotus logo on it rather than the Honda one, I think. Very, very beautiful. So that's that. And then it just leaves one more. Just zoom you back a second. Just leaves us with one more sprue to look at, with all the brakes and the wheels and all that stuff. Or the wheel hubs, I should say. Sort of the bit that stops the car, really. I've seen the bit that makes it go, but making it stop, especially something like Monaco, is very important. So we've actually got some engine parts as well. We've got this the plenum chamber, which is where the pop-off valve goes, of course. And you can see this is the what they call the log on the top of the plenum chamber here. This bit here. You've got your, oh, it's a bit strange, isn't it? The rollover bar, driver's rollover hoop, but it looks like it's broken. It isn't. It is supposed to be like that. I think there's like a control box that sits underneath it. So one of the arms is actually shorter. Can you see that? It's a shorter arm on one side. It's got the same hole underneath, so obviously it's intended to be that way. And then we've got our turbochargers themselves. And I was right, they are IHI turbos. You can actually see it. Can you make it out? IHI turbo, it says on them. Aren't they huge though? They're really big. I mean, today's turbos are about a third that size. They're much smaller, you know. That'll be the intake turbo, and then the actual exhaust turbo, which is the one that drives the system. Actually, it has to be smaller to obviously spool up quickly. So that's the exhaust side, small one. And then you've got a fire extinguisher. And then we've got our exhaust manifold that goes to the turbo, between the engine and the turbos. Then we've got the rear wing support here, where you put your rear rain light, and then we've got our disc brakes here. As I mentioned, on these, doesn't really need any photo etch, I don't think, on there, because the carbon ceramic finish, it doesn't look metallic anyway, so you don't need it. We've got the gearbox oil cooler there, little radiator, and then we've got our brake calipers, Brembo brakes, of course, as we saw on those decals. And then over here we have basically got at the end what is essentially some of the connector unions. That one's some of the connector unions there. That's for the hydraulic system for the active suspension. And then we've got these that's actually basically the coil packs for the ignition there. Those little things, electronic ignition, and obviously that connects into the top for the spark plugs that are down in the cylinder. And then that's sort of it really. We've just got one or two other smaller parts where various unions and little connectors, and I mean, look at that, that's nice, isn't it? They're beautifully moulded though, they can't fault the moulding at all, it's really nice. So it's a fantastic kit, I've got to be honest. I mean, in terms of giving it a score, the only thing that gives me reservations about this, two things actually. There's this variation in some of the finish, which I think on a racing car kit, I don't like that. You don't really see that with the Tamiya so much. And it does create, if you want to cut corners like I sometimes do, it can create a lot of issues, that sort of thing. Actually, this wants to go back in here. It can be a problem, I think. It has the potential to be a problem. This bag's could be a problem as well, I can tell you. I'll tell you what I'm going to do with this. Lift it over very gently. Like that. There we go, sorted. Yeah, so the variation on those finishes where you're getting, first of all, having the glossy finish on the tub of the cockpit, that's a bit of a mistake. I don't know why they've gone that route. They should have just finished their tool a bit differently for that, really. So not sure about that, to be honest. I don't really like that. The actual overall finish of like the bodywork is really good, I think. I mean, you could just with a super fine rubbing paper and sort of polish, you can really get that up a bit better, I think, as well. So you could experiment if you don't want to paint, or you can just paint it the conventional way, in which case there's no problem. So I think in terms of the kit, I will sort of draw a halt to reviewing that, and we'll talk about this book. So I think I should sort of automatically give that my normal sort of rating. If you bear with me 1 second, I'll be right with you, because it's not an easy thing to manoeuvre about this. It's just such a big monster. Let's just make sure this has gone back correctly. There we go, because it is a beautiful presentation. I like the way they've done it, very like Tamiya in many ways. I think my reservations are tiny. The biggest one is the price, though, because it's a lot of money, £250. It's a heck of a lot of cash. That's a big chunk of change. And remember, I had the Nigel Mansell Tamiya one. I paid 110, I think, for it, and I stupidly sold it for about the same money, which was a dumb thing to do. Which I never touched it. And I wish I hadn't now. I wish I hadn't. But it is a bit overpriced, I think, is my beef. So I'm going to give it 9 out of 10, and it's only really, the only reservations are the price, which is way OTT, especially when you got to spend another £100, another £100 on that upgrade set to get the right decals and get the carbon fibre effect. It's a lot of money, so it's going to cost you £350 this. So you'll understand, it's not that I don't like the kit, it's beautiful. And thank you very much to Ian Nichols, he very generously let us all see that. We all owe him one. Really thank you a lot. I'm going to have a look at the book in a second, but I think that I just feel it's a bit pricey. I think if it was 150, 100 to 200, under 200, I think it needs to be, really, if I'm honest, because it's, yeah. But I suppose you're paying for the exclusivity. Anyway, let's have a look at this book. We'll flick through this quite quickly, but it'll give you a flavour, and if you're not convinced yet, it might just convince you. So there's Ayrton Senna with the guys from Lotus, and oops, yeah, you mentioned that the book was had some issues. Oh, from Spot Model, thank you for your... You'll remove that because it's got Ian's address on it. Just thanking him for his order. So this is the... yeah, it's another one of these Joe Honda pictorial series of books, but what we've got basically is it goes through basically race by race, showing you... Monaco is the critical one, but it gives you such brilliant reference photographs, which are, they're really worth their weight in gold, aren't they? If you're going to build this kit, you can see straight away how this is going to be helpful. It's really going to make the difference when you're trying to give it, that extra level of detail, trying to make sure that you get it right. And it goes through the races. And actually, I was slightly... I overlooked the fact that at the French Grand Prix... That's the British Grand Prix. Yeah, you can see what I was saying. I was right, actually. So you can see you've got the Camel cigarette logos at the French Grand Prix. Quite clearly evident there. But at the British Grand Prix, we have this Lotus. You can see it's just got Lotus, which is as per it's provided here. But unfortunately, it's not quite right for Monte Carlo. And it sort of, it just sums it up. You can clearly see there at Monte Carlo, Monaco Grand Prix, it's got Camel. So that would be the correct logos to have. British Grand Prix, yeah, you can see Ayrton's really going for it, and he's got this matching helmet matching the car. At the Hungarian Grand Prix, they go back to the Camel logos. And... do we miss Detroit? Monaco, Belgium. I think they did things in a slightly odd way. I'm looking for Detroit. Does it not show Detroit? That's very unusual if that's the case. It doesn't seem to show the Detroit race. And then it goes into 1988, which is something else. So it's a bit strange because it came straight after Monaco, I think, with Detroit. I think it was the next race. Round 6. Round 4. So round 5, how very strange in this book. It's got round 4. Maybe there's a licensing issue. You go straight to round 6, and there's no round 5. It just shows the Monaco shots here. That's a little odd, isn't it? But you know, you buy these books because you get so much detail, and you get photographs like that where you can see all the turbo system and the intake logs on the top of the engine, and they're really, really important to have that level of detail, which you really need. You see exactly how the suspension pickup points work and where all the connectors go, etc, etc. And there's those intake trumpets, scoops for the turbos. So the Italian Grand Prix. And then you get to Spanish Grand Prix, and again here we've got some nice shots of the brakes, brake calipers, and a rear shot of the engine. They've got a number of Honda engineers, 1, 2, 3, I count 5 engineers from Honda there working with them. Amazing, amazing. And then it goes into the following year, which we're not so interested in really, but yeah, so there we go. So the 99T, it's really just a pictorial guide, but these kind of things are valuable references. You should always invest in something like that if you want to, especially when you're making a model that's quite a big scale like this. So there we are. So many thanks to Ian. I couldn't have made this review without you. I hope he has more luck with Spot Model getting this upgrade set with the extra decals and the carbon fibre and things coming soon. But we really appreciate that he's given us the opportunity to see that. It is a lovely model. If somebody gave me that, I would be in orbit. But to have to pay $350 in total to get what you need there, it just seemed a bit pricey. It's a bit overpriced. And I guess it's because it's a low run these days, and this is why they call it vintage selection. I mean, I'm saying all this, but if you want to get that Mansell Williams, for example, that's going to cost you $200 to $250 probably now, if you go on eBay, because it's out of production. And this is the problem. A lot of these kits have been dropped. Can't get any of the new Formula 1 cars in kit form now. Licensing issues seem to be the problem, but it's a real shame, because when you see something like that, it is just glorious. It's just glorious. So if you ignore the price, it would have got really a 9.5, 9.75 out of 10. There's no flash or anything in that kit. It's beautiful. Just had some reservations about some of the finishes of some of the big parts. A little bit of inconsistency, but overall, if you're the sort of person that's an advanced modeler who's going to paint it all anyway, none of this is really a problem, I don't think. So I give it 9 out of 10. It would have been 9.75. It'd been a bit cheaper. Anyway, thank you very much to Ian. 9.9 out of 10, 9.75 for the actual contents of the box, if you ignore the go to denial and ignore the price. But thank you to Ian very much for supplying it. Hope you found it interesting. Thanks for watching, and please stay tuned, and we'll have some more interesting videos coming up for you very soon. I'm now going to go and get this packed back up for our good friend Ian, so he gets it back in perfect condition, and make sure it gets back to him as quickly as possible. Until next time, thanks for your time. Hope you enjoyed the show. Till we meet again, look after yourselves, stay well, stay safe. Thanks a lot, and bye for now.